What an insightful keynote from the front lines of Operation Warp Speed. I'm Dan Wallace, Area Vice President, Civilian at ServiceNow, and I'll moderate our next panel featuring a discussion on the importance of people in building resilient missions across the government. I'm pleased to have Erica Denny, Associate Chief Information Officer for Digital Infrastructure Technologies, General Services Administration, Brian Catani, Chief Technology Officer, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and Katie Olson, Deputy Director, Defense Digital Service, joining me for today's panel. First up, can each of you give a brief introduction on your role at your agency, and then we'll dive into the discussion. Brian, we'll start with you.
Sure, glad to. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Brian Gattoni, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. In 30 seconds, CISA, we're the nation's risk advisor. Through our efforts to understand and advise on cyber and physical risks to the nation's critical infrastructure, we help partners strengthen their own capabilities. We connect our stakeholders in industry and government to each other and to resources, analysis, and tools that help them build their own cyber, communications, and physical security and resilience, and in turn, strengthen national resilience. It's all about forming the right partnerships to help make decisions together, understand challenges together, and find the right way to manage our risk. I help set the technical vision that supports our overall mission at the agency. And I'm really excited to be here with this panel to talk about what we do.
Brian, thank you. Welcome. Katie, over to you.
My name is Katie Olson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Defense Digital Service. DDS is a SWAT team of nerds reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense. We work on critical technologies that allow the Department of Defense to function from a sort of cybersecurity and force protection perspective. Pleased to be with you today and to discuss some of the great work that our team is doing.
Katie, thank you for joining us. Welcome. And then Erica, welcome.
Thank you.
Our background.
Thank you, Dan. Erica Denny with Digital Infrastructure Technologies within GSA IT. And GSA is, many of you are probably familiar with our organization. We drive value and savings across real estate acquisition and technology across the government. And part of my role here in GSA is delivering infrastructure and IT operations for our GSA user base. And we're focused on digital transformation, like many of you all are, and we're also focused on offering choice to our consumers and developing that customer experience.
Great, thanks, Erica. I appreciate the introduction there. I'm going to open up our panel today with a question for all of you. And the question is, when you hear resilient mission, what does that mean to you? And Erica, why don't we start with you and provide a little bit of background on what you think from a resilient mission perspective?
Sure. Yeah, and I have a long history in organizational design, so this is a topic I've spent a lot of time on. But resilient mission really means just facing, the ability to face adversity and overcome obstacles and get back on track. But what it really means to me is that strong leadership. So having that ability to have vision and help navigate employees and customers through some difficult change. If you look over the past year, there's been a lot of adversity and obstacles that have come our way. I was just on the phone with some folks in Houston who were still conducting a meeting. They had no electricity, no water, no power, but yet they were still carrying on. But strong leadership, and then from an employee base, giving them the capability, the empowerment to have adaptability and flexibility in the workforce, being able to navigate those obstacles and overcome some of those odd, interesting things that happen throughout the way that detract you from your mission.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really valid points there. The reference to the folks in Texas as they try to become resilient as they go through the infrastructure issues that they had in the wake of last week's storm. So Brian, CISA has been a name that's out in the media quite a bit recently in the way you build a resilient infrastructure to support our country. From a resilient mission perspective, what does that mean to you and the folks at CISA?
For us, a lot of our focus is on the partnerships necessary to ensure resilience. It's not one entity that can do it by themselves. And when you look at how the nation operates, what critical functions are required to be provided down at the individual citizen level and the districts and the regions and nationwide, understanding how that all operates together as a system, and then putting information in decision makers' hands that help them manage their risk at the point at which it occurs. Resilience, in my mind, doesn't mean reacting to the challenge of the day and pretending that planning wouldn't have helped you get there. So if you have an atomic breakdown of the potential risks that are coming your way, the vulnerabilities, the threats, the consequences, and you put some decision science behind it to understand what you should do given a certain scenario, you're going to knock down a lot of the variables that are going to prevent your resilience and therefore enhance it. You get that information into people's hands so they can make decisions that are good for themselves, and they do that in the context of how that's good for the national critical functions they may serve, then everybody's going to benefit.
That's a valid point. I think anticipating the challenges that organizations are going to face in the future and building a plan around that certainly proves to be as a resilient approach to meeting some of the mission requirements that your organization handles. Katie, I'm curious about your perspective from a resilient mission perspective. What are your thoughts around that?
Sure. I think as both Erica and Brian have said, it's partly the resiliency of your workforce and also the ability to continue to execute and deliver on your mission in the face of challenging times. So for DDS, for example, the pandemic meant that we had to surge to allow the DoD to continue executing on its mission. So for example, we built a symptom tracking tool that allowed the military to ensure that COVID was not being spread in critical facilities where, such as ships, for example, where people might be in tight quarters. We also, worked closely with Brian's organization on Operation Warp Speed. So partly, the resilient mission to us has meant contributing in a sort of a time of crisis and ensuring that the mission can go on. And I think that also extends to the workforce as well. We worked closely with Washington Headquarters Services, which is the hiring agency at the Pentagon when the pandemic started, to ensure that we would be able to, one, onboard new employees who, because of the pandemic and because of the need to pursue this mission, were able to continue, joining the DoD workforce. So we have helped onboard thousands of employees at this point simply by providing access to tools, Slack, Gmail, and to laptops, things like that, to allow employees to be able to onboard remotely. So part of the resilient mission is also ensuring that employees have what they need to function in sort of trying times.
I think we've all sort of dealt with that, and we've watched as all organizations have had to respond to the challenges of meeting the needs of our workforce and the way that they serve the mission. And we've all noticed the work that the federal government has put into this to ensuring that the services that they offer to the citizens have not been disrupted as we've gone through what has been a challenging year in the past. So I really appreciate all the perspective that each of you have provided on that. Katie, I want to follow up with an additional question for you. You have a fascinating background on city planning and leveraging advanced technology to solve problems. Combined with that background in your current role at DDS, how has using modern technology to meet the mission fueled innovation in your workforce and the citizens that you serve?
Sure. So both in my work at the DoD and the work I did within the city of Chicago, it starts with user-centered design. So oftentimes when we think of a new technology implementation, we're looking at what we perceive as being broken, what we perceive as being the roadblock to making progress or achieving a mission. And sometimes that roadblock isn't what we think it is. So both in my work in Chicago and at DDS, we've brought in, we start from a foundation of user-centered design and bringing in UX, UI designers to be able to help us really embed with the end user to understand what the true challenge is and making sure that we're solving the right problem right. From there, sort of just conducting this sort of discovery session with our users, we're able to start to scope what the problem is, and at a minimum create an MVP of what could be possible, what sort of modern technology could be created to meet the mission in a way that goes above and beyond what we even might have thought to be possible. So it really starts from defining the right need, and then from there, bringing in your product managers, your engineers, data scientists, et cetera, And that's important to note as well. It's important to, especially to our work at DoD, that we're going out and sourcing the sort of right talent to be able to get this work done.
Have you seen that process challenge at all during the pandemic as you've had to engage with the remote workforce?
So DDS has been somewhat fortunate in that we were a remote and distributed workforce, even prior to the pandemic. We made the decision several years ago when we were starting to grow the team that we wanted to be able to tap into a workforce, not just based in DC, where our headquarters are in the Pentagon, but in sort of the tech meccas around the country. So we have employees that are in Seattle, employees that are in San Francisco. And I think it's something that I hope the rest of the department and frankly, the rest of the government decides to do. And we've seen that it, because of the pandemic, that it can be possible to leverage a remote workforce, certainly expands your talent pool. And with all of the sort of tools and technology that we have in place, it's certainly possible to be able to leverage the talents of people around the country.
I would agree. I think we've witnessed that as well. And so that's good perspective on that. I want to open this up to this next question up to the broader panel here. You're all in management roles. Can you talk about the biggest lessons you've learned from implementing new tools and workflows? How did you get your employees trained and on board with the new processes? Erica, we'll start with you on that.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to pick up on what Katie was talking about with the UX and UI and how important that is to work with people ahead of time before you're rolling out new tools or introducing new tools. I find that people want to say and they want to be heard. And even if they don't necessarily want to move to a new technology, as long as they're getting a chance to participate and have a say and play around with how it might look, I find that the rollout tends to be shorter and less interruption on the end side. A good example, just in the last couple of months that I've been here, I've had to deal with, two specific tools that we replaced because it was cheaper. And we were told, it's got the same functionality. Well, it doesn't have the same functionality. And so, we have employees that work with other government agencies, and guess what? This tool is not compatible with, a different environment. And we learned that the hard way after we saved money, but in the end had to spend more money because we had to bring back on some other tools. So, if you spend that time up front, you really do save a lot of time and money, on the end. And I say, so we also, we have a good communications team. And just my last point is we've invested in a UX UI specifically to communicate to employees. We used to have pretty long, dense, manuals on how to get into a piece of technology, how to learn it. And now we kind of flip it. We introduce it and then we hold an Ask Me Anything. And we have a one-page visual of here's how to navigate this new tool. And it's just made it quite a difference in how the employees respond to it, how the adoption rate is, and really how successful that tool is at the end.
Appreciate that perspective. Brian, same question to you. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that triumvirate of tools, people, and processes really come to the forefront when a situation forces you to replace one to support the other two. And so we've been in situations where, brand new technology may be made available that the processes and the people aren't ready to catch up to yet. So it shifts a lot of your management and leadership responsibilities to the culture aspect within your team to say, okay, we've got a new teammate, right? It's this bit of technology. It's this tool that we have to use. How do our processes need to adapt to use this tool? How does the tool need to be customized to accept our unique processes? And then that training and iteration amongst the people that have to interact with it to say, yeah, it's time to change the way we do business because there's a better outcome we seek together. So when we got forced into this environment, our agency's journey was in a little different place than the Department of Defense's. We are a year and a half old. We're tackling some really robust national challenges. Mm-hmm. We have a nationwide footprint of regional protective and cybersecurity advisors, and we have a national capital region force of analysts. we're looking at our mission from how we work day to day, and then all of a sudden everybody's distributed, and provide a really interesting opportunity to learn from our field forces how they do it, because they are out there all the time. Right. So instead of us having to get on a plane and go out to the region and figure out what it is to be sort of disconnected and have to use new tools and technologies to work together without being on the same floor, being in the same room and sharing information face to face like we're used to, we were able to get some lessons learned from the rest of our forces to drive how we here in the DC area operate. And I think it's done a lot to strengthen the collaboration across the agency and for the good of the mission.
Yeah, that's great. Katie, your thoughts?
So I think, as Brian said, it's a combination of people and products and processes. And, as I mentioned, a big part of our, advantage going into this was that we had a number of the sort of tools and resources in place with our colleagues around the country. We sort of already had a system of working remotely, but really extending that to the rest of the DoD was really important. Everything from the allowing them to onboard remotely and helping them think through if there's no reason, even when we can sort of get back to quote unquote normal, that they can't have this more distributed workforce, and helping them think through the technology and acquire the equipment that they need to continue the mission. I think for us, one of the other great opportunities was also taking a look at our cyber hygiene. When we had an entirely distributed workforce and we're shipping out new equipment, laptops, phones, et cetera, to people around the country to join the team, it was a good opportunity for us to make sure that if everyone's on their own network, that that they're using a VPN, that all of the devices have some kind of remote management in place. Everyone is using two-factor authentication. So, for us, I think we really tried to seize the moment to make sure that we had really good cyber hygiene in place, knowing that everyone would be in the situation for a while. And the last piece I'll say, sort of speaks to the power of ritual. And this is pretty, I think, pandemic specific, but maybe not, to the extent someone continues to manage an entirely remote workforce. But the things that we did in the before times, a weekly stand-up, team happy hours, every 6 weeks or so, we do a rundown of our entire portfolio, top to bottom, all the projects that we're doing. Those are all sort of rituals that we decided to continue. And I think it's made a world of difference in the pandemic, even if they're all virtual. Having the team get together, sort of face to face every week for a weekly stand up, or having virtual happy hours, continuing to do our portfolio review. I think having those structures in place is all the more important when you are working in different time zones, working in different locations.
Yeah, it's the interesting balance of the fatigue of being on the regular, Zoom calls or team calls, and then going in and saying, hey, we've got to connect on a personal level to make sure that we're all still aligned to the mission that we're working on here and the different projects that are important to each of us. So that's interesting. Brian, you hit on cyber hygiene. I hate to transition to the next question without giving you an opportunity to sort of see if you have any additional thoughts on cyber hygiene as you think about a distributed workforce.
Absolutely. It's accelerated some ideas that, those of us in CTO shops and DDS like shops, those futurist kind of things. Now that the problem's here, it helps to have a group of folks that are specifically funded to look at the future and figure out what to do. So we've, had some efforts in the mix of exploring the different security constructs for future technology. And now that we moved remote, it was nice to have an environment to rapidly collaborate and move some of these ideas to the forefront for adoption. We've seen a great influx of use of our trusted internet connections artifacts, the reference architectures and program documentations we put out to federal departments and agencies as primary customers of CISA for guidance on how to securely connect to the internet. And we were able to rapidly respond with guidance that addressed some of the new paradigms folks found themselves in with, much larger use of their VPNs, people being at home, understanding how the risk shifts to other hardware devices, and making people aware that their cybersecurity posture now translates from their office habits to their home habits and how they set up their own devices. So a lot of that education, a lot of that knowledge of the technology in the past year has allowed us to give really decent advice to folks to make risk decisions for themselves, to improve their own cyber hygiene, and to help us be in a posture to be resilient against our nation's adversaries.
Great. Appreciate that feedback on that. Erica, you're responsible for leading enterprise-wide organizational resource strategies for large and small service organizations, executing national change initiatives, and overseeing organizational design and workforce planning initiatives. How are you implementing new technology while also empowering your workforce to meet the mission?
Yeah, we focus on 5 key pillars for success. And the first one, of course, is the mission. So any new technology, we really look at, does that add value to the mission, or is it a nice to have? And so that's a serious conversation we have with the employees as partners as a part of that. Is this adding value to your day? And the second, of course, are those employees themselves. We focus on employee experience, the EX. We're starting to measure EX. And that has become a new KPI for us. So the technology that we're putting out there has to be an ad for them, a value add. And if it's not, and as we measure that, then we start to really think through whether this technology, is there a better way, or is there something that we need to do to fix it, for example. And then the third, of course, is cybersecurity. We look at, does it strengthen or weaken our cybersecurity posture? We're thankful to have an incredible cybersecurity team that really bends over backward and works with us on all the new technology. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of coordination between that office. The fourth is operations. What does it take to operate? Cost, people, maintenance, how time intensive is it? We're going through a digital transformation. So of course we're looking for cloud. So, does it have to be maintained on-prem or in cloud? And really pushing, folks, particularly if they're asking for something specific, and it is a applications they want to maintain on-prem. We really work with them for different options for that. And then the fourth is innovation. The fifth, but the fifth is innovation. And you may have heard our CIO talks about innovation as in our DNA, and that's really true. And we really look at, is this truly innovative, or is it kind of a standard operating procedure? And we're always really looking for that next innovative idea. And so we talk a lot about, is this putting us at a different level, or is this just keeping us status quo? So those are really the 5 things that we look at. But I think overall, I go back to that mission. Is it adding value to the business? And if it is, we try to pursue it as much as we can. That's
great. You may not have an answer that you can share with us, but I have to ask, is there anything innovative that you're working on now that we can get a preview?
Absolutely. Yeah. A couple of things. I would say the one is, maybe it's not so innovative, but it's I live in a bit of a rural area and I've not seen these Amazon lockers. Everyone keeps talking. I've never seen one. Everyone laughs at me and I'm like, I have no idea what they are. But we're trying to do remote touchless drop-off pickup of technology. So when you need a refresh or you're having a problem with your laptop, you don't have to come in and actually pick one up. We don't even have to mail it for you if you don't want to, but you can come by and just you don't even go through guards anymore and pick up and receive and drop off. That's kind of interesting. We can manage it remotely. We can set the codes and things like that all remotely, which is kind of it's a new idea for us. That's one of the pieces of that we're looking into. And then I would say the second is we're developing personas. So we're looking at, so anytime we develop a new technology, even if it's a rollout of an upgrade, for example, or an update, excuse me, we don't have it in place now, but we're going to know the types of employees that will need extra help. We will know the types of employees that can do it in a self-service manner, and we'll know the types that may need hybrid. And so you can target communications to those different. You can also reduce your on-site, your support from pushing that self-service for people who are willing to adapt that. So it's kind of an interesting feature. We're really looking forward to getting that up and running. We're in the nascent stages, but that's, I think, going to be a pretty significant help in our operational costs.
Yeah, both very innovative, and I'm sure hugely valuable to your workforce, especially in today's work environment. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Brian, your mission as the CTO at CISA is to build a more secure and resilient infrastructure for the future. What is your vision to achieve that, and what are you and while you're ensuring your stakeholders are aligned to that mission?
So for me, it's back to one of the things I tend to open with, and that is the partnerships that are necessary to facilitate the identification of risk and the decisions necessary to manage and mitigate it. Here at CISA, we're organized around the principles of defending today and securing tomorrow. We've got a physical footprint in the nation to help advise our stakeholders out there of what risks may come their way and what they can do about it. And underlying all of that for my realm is a data model that supports the decisions that need to be made, the information that needs to be shared, and then the partnerships that need to be fostered through an organization like CISA that can bring together the government and the private industry to tackle our challenges. Private industry owns and operates north of 85% of the critical infrastructure in this nation. And it's critical that they have a partner in the government that they can trust, that will convene, hear their interests, give them the best information we can to support the decisions they need to make, and doesn't come with the unintended consequences of organizations that may have certain regulatory or law enforcement functions. One of the things that makes CISA unique is, aside from some aspects of the chemical facility security business, we don't have any regulatory function. So it's really on us to bring together trusted partnerships and share information. And parts where we can get innovative in that is to take tools that one partner has been able to employ successfully, distill those for the lessons learned that can be applied to everybody else, and then share it as broadly as possible. We've made a lot of strides in our own digital footprint on CISA.gov and sharing information that we think is useful to our partners, to the point here with the recent supply chain compromise, the SolarWinds incident, if you will. We're able to leverage commercial technologies like GitHub to put information out there, to put a tool out there we call Sparrow that helps incident response teams detect potentially malicious activity for themselves in Azure or Microsoft O365 environments, and then participate in the conversation in identifying further risk and mitigation opportunities.
We've certainly appreciated the collaboration with your organization, your team over the years. So we can speak to the partnership and the way that you've approached the broader community to deliver services to CISA and beyond CISA within the broader federal government. So thank you on the feedback there. More broadly, thank you to Erica, Brian, and Katie. We really appreciate you taking the opportunity to sit down with us today and share your insights. Up next, my colleague Kelly Horton will engage in a dialogue with State Department's Brian Merrick. So we'll send it over to Kelly and Brian. And thank you so much for today.